welcome to another edition of Talking About Movies. I'm Joe Moser.
I'm Rick Winston.
And today we're going to be focusing on a large topic, which is war films. But we're going to try to narrow that topic by, first of all, focusing on what we would classify as anti-war films, and then with a particular focus on World War I films.
That says it. I was reminded of this book, Films of Peace and War, put out by Grove Press sometime in the 60s, and I was reminded that this was the first movie book that I bought was my very own money. And I was always interested in movies, but became aware that there was such a thing as the peace movement going on, and gave me a new lens to look at all those war movies that I grew up watching on TV.
Yeah, and so you grew up, I'm sure, watching a lot of World War II films, Hollywood World War II films.
Yes, and Hollywood Korean War films.
Ah, right, yeah. So, and I grew up just, I would say, as some of the Vietnam War movies started to be made, and I watched a lot of old World War II movies with John Wayne and et cetera. And I think we should say from the outset that war movies, particularly Hollywood war movies, have probably done more harm than good in terms of glorifying war, making it seem like an adventure, making it seem spectacular. And that's why I think we're looking at it, the topic, in a critical way, trying to highlight films that are showing the human costs of war and doing it in a responsible way.
Yeah. And one of the first films I saw that sort of led me in this direction was the 1931 version of All Quiet on the Western Front. I saw it when I was maybe 10 years old, 11 years old, and it was really powerful, not like any of the glorifications of patriotism that I had seen on television.
Yeah, so that's a key. It's based on a novel, a German novel, written by Erich Maria Remarque, who was a very important figure in interwar German literature. Was a soldier himself in the German army, and the novel really had an enormous global impact, particularly because there were strong pacifist movements that were building in European countries between the wars. And then, interestingly, Hollywood adapts this film, which made this huge impact. And the lead actor in the film is a very young Lew Ayres, who goes on to an excellent career as mostly a character actor, but he's a lead here. And he was so impressed and so affected by his participation in the film that when he served in the U.S. military during World War II, he filed to be a conscientious objector, which was a very controversial decision.
Yes, it was not clear whether that was going to harm his career or not.
Yeah, but he actually served, he was in harm's way. He served very bravely, but just in a non-combat capacity. So that's a real keystone, or touchstone, I should say. All Quiet on the Western Front, both the novel comes out in the mid-20s, I think, and then the film not long after in the early 30s. So that is a film that's obviously critical of war. It shows the disillusionment of these young men. It's about German men, but it's in English, and these men are sort of seduced by the propaganda, the allure, the adventure of war. They go off and become completely disillusioned, watch many of their friends die around them. So that's the kind of war film that I think we're most interested in. So we're going to start with another really seminal war film from later in the 30s, 37, by one of the great directors, Jean Renoir, Grand Illusion.
Yeah, this is Grand Illusion. And Renoir, like Erich Maria Remarque, had served in World War I and actually was wounded and walked with a limp for the rest of his life. So he knew what he was talking about. And this is a terrific movie, and we don't see any battle scenes. We hear about one. in which the men are captured, the men that we're going to follow. And this first scene we're going to show is a new batch of POWs has come in, and the ones that have been there for a while are showing them around and saying, this is where we're building a tunnel that we are hoping to escape. And we'll see some of the lead characters, the actors in here, Jean Gabin, Pierre Fresnay, and Renoir's mobile camera. It's not like anybody is holding the camera on their shoulder and following these guys around. This is amazing choreography for 1937. Anything else you want to say about this clip?
Well, let's take a look, and then I'll have a few things to say about Jean Gabin. But
Okay.
let's check out this clip from Grand Illusion.
C'est le tour de qui? C'est un quartier. À moi? Tiens.
Qu'est-ce que c'est que ça?
C'est pour respirer. Et on a déjà dans le trou, mais on met des rallonges.
Ah bon. Mais tes sacs là, c'est pourquoi?
C'est pour ramener la terre.
Et ce truc-là?
Ça, c'est le signal d'alarme. Si j'étouffe, hein, eh ben je tire sur la ficelle. Alors la boîte, elle tombe. Et les copains, eh ben, ils me ramènent par les pattes. Hein, les pattes. Les pâtres des montagnes. Chevrolet et la liberté.
Qu'est-ce que t'attends?
Je me déguise en taupe. Pinambour.
Dites donc. Il est solide au moins votre tunnel.
On s'est taillé comme il faut, avec du bois qu'on emprunte au théâtre.
Et la terre, qu'est-ce qu'on en fait?
Bon, on a commencé par la mettre sous le plancher. C'est tellement bourré, on n'entrera plus une épingle maintenant. Alors on remplit des sacs et on les emporte avec soi à la promenade. Auf Wiedersehen!
Vous avez entendu? Non? Je vous assure que j'ai entendu quelque chose.
C'est rien.
Tiens encore.
Bon, bah, si tu veux, on peut envoyer quelqu'un en reconnaissance. Tiens, toi, avec ton air ingénu, va voir en douce ce qui se passe. Je ferai semblant d'aller au cabinet.
So this movie, when I saw it the first time, I was blown away by Jean Gabin, who plays this working class character who's an officer, and that creates a lot of tension in the film. But he is such a compelling actor. I would compare him to like a French Spencer Tracy.
Exactly, yeah. He had a real man of the people quality that made him such a big star in France for so long.
Yeah, and he's able to throughout most of this movie underplay. He's not sort of a typical 30s or 40s actor. There's a lot of subtlety, and then of course we have so an interesting relationship develops between him and the character Rosenthal, played by Marcel Dalio, who is identified as Jewish in the film.
Yeah.
So this is a very interesting and kind of progressive element of the film because it actually highlights the tension, ethnic tension, and it actually, to a small extent, highlights the problem of anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
And also, we're going to see in this next clip, we have this very interesting relationship develop between the Pierre Fresnay character, Bourdieu, and the character Raffenstein, played by
Eric von Stroheim.
the great director, but also...
Von Stroheim had been in Hollywood through the teens and the 20s, went back to France, and actually had lost a lot of his ability to speak German. He had to relearn this part. But this is a very telling scene. This is kind of the core of the film, this conversation between these two guys. They're aristocrats, that's what they share. And de Boileau is saying, you know, this war is going to, our class is over. You know, we have more in common with each other than I have with my working class people who are under me. So the scene takes place in the chapel of the castle where the prisoner camp is. So let's take a look at this scene from Grand Illusion.
Edmond Boidieu, l'attaché militaire que j'ai connu autrefois à Berlin.
Ah, très bien, il est très content. Il a été blessé, il a un bas en moins, il a épousé une femme très riche.
C'est une très belle carrière. Vous l'avez connue?
Blue Mimi? Of course. You were riding her when you won the Grand Military in Liverpool in 1909, weren't you?
Prince of Wales Cup.
I remember.
Asseyez-vous. Je vais vous dire quelque chose, Boidieu. Croyez bien que le métier que je fais à présent me repugne autant qu'à vous.
De sévère.
J'étais un combattant. Maintenant, je suis un fonctionnaire, un policier. Mais c'est le seul moyen qui me reste encore pour me donner l'air de servir ma patrie. Brûlé partout. La raison pour mes gants. Colonne vertébrale fracturée en deux endroits. Une plaque d'argent. La rotule du genou est dans l'argent aussi. Les malheurs de la guerre m'ont apporté ces richesses.
Me permettez-vous une question?
Naturellement.
Pourquoi avez-vous fait pour moi une exception en me recevant chez vous?
Pourquoi? Parce que vous vous appelez Boidieu, officier de carrière dans l'armée française, et moi, Rauffenstein, officier de carrière dans l'armée impériale d'Allemagne.
Mais mes camarades sont aussi des officiers.
Un maréchal et un Rosenthal, officier?
Ils sont de très bons soldats.
Oui, joli cadeau de la Révolution française.
Je crains que ni vous ni moi ne puissions arrêter la marche du temps.
Boidieu, je ne sais pas qui va gagner cette guerre. La fin, quelle qu'elle soit, sera la fin de Rauffenstein et de Boidieu.
On n'a peut-être plus besoin de nous.
Et vous ne trouvez pas que c'est dommage?
Peut-être. J'admire le soin que vous prenez de votre géranium.
Ne croyez pas que je sois devenu botaniste, mais c'est la seule fleur de la forteresse. Il ne pousse ici que des lierres et des orties.
And so overall, this film makes a really powerful humanist statement, as Rick is saying. These two characters who are different nationalities are united by their sort of kind of aristocratic values, but then we also see other instances of, and I don't want to spoil anything if you haven't seen the film,
Yeah.
but you see other instances of people transcending the kind of animosity that built up between the French and German people in the course of the war. And Renoir's, I think, ultimate statement is people are people, right? And that's the reason why we were talking about this earlier. This film, during World War II, once World War II ramps up a couple years after the film comes out, this film is banned in both France and Germany because it's so sympathetic to both sides. And that was not seen as conducive to building the will to fight the enemy during the next war.
Yeah, and meanwhile, Renoir had to come to America to escape the Nazis. So it's still it's like a Mount Everest of classic movies,
Yeah.
or a Mount Mansfield at any rate.
Yeah, and it is I should say #1 in the Criterion Collection, and for very good reason. And Rick, you presented this film to an audience of folks just a couple
Maple
months
Corner,
ago.
just last month, and they were riveted, completely riveted that the characters are so sympathetic and so relatable, and it confirmed my opinion that this film has a greatness that transcends so much.
Yeah. And there's a scene with Jean Gabin and a cow in this film. It's a very short, simple scene, but it just speaks volumes. So I love this film very much.
Well, we're staying in the same time period, but the next film is exactly 20 years later after Grand Illusion, also banned in France when it came out. We're talking about Stanley Kubrick's Paths of Glory, based on a 1935 novel by a Canadian writer who served in World War I, Humphrey Cobb, based on a true incident of these French soldiers who were picked at random to kind of take the fall for a military disaster and were tried and executed. But Kubrick was less than 30 years old when he made this absolutely brilliant film.
So let's take a look at a scene from early in the film when the Colonel Dax, the main character played by Kirk Douglas, he's going through the trench, kind of inspecting his soldiers, but also I think trying to rally their spirits because they're about to go over the top and into no man's land and face the enemy.
Yeah, and even though this everybody in the movie is supposedly French, the cast is entirely American, which mainly works,
Right.
with a few exceptions. But this is a just spectacular opening scene with Kubrick's legendary skill at work.
I tend to like early Kubrick more than later Kubrick, but I think a reason this film is so effective today is at the time I think there is a very for the late 50s a pretty intense battle sequence, and Kubrick was trying for I think a sense of realism that I think, because there isn't a lot of gore in it, which that just wasn't something Hollywood would portray in a late 50s film. I think the film actually, in some ways, is more effective as an anti-war statement today because the battle would not be so spectacular and engaging to audiences today.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's relatively early in the film. The battle sets off the chain of events that is the real drama of the film. I read that this film was shot in Germany, and Kubrick was able to rent 50 acres from a local landowner to actually recreate a World War I battlefield. So Kubrick was even then had grand visions.
So
but the scene we're going to watch is later in the film, the trial of the three soldiers, and how completely stacked this trial is against these people. So let's watch that scene now.
Did any men in your company get beyond our wire?
No, sir.
Is it true that you've been designated a coward simply and purely because you drew a slip of paper marked X?
Yes, sir.
I don't see that that's significant. It's accepted practice in the French army to pick examples by lot. And since this entire company advanced only a few meters, picking by lot was eminently fair in this case.
Well, I'd like to point out that this soldier has distinguished himself in some of the bloodiest battles of the war. The court's permission, I'll read citations for bravery that he's already earned on 2 occasions. First, citations in the orders in the Army for bravery.
It's immaterial, Colonel. The accused is not being tried for his former bravery, but for his recent cowardice. Medals are no defense.
May I call witnesses to his character?
You may not. But you may call witnesses to the effect that he reached the German wire.
Mr. President, no one in the entire regiment got anywhere near the German wire, including myself.
Call the next accused. If you're through, Colonel.
Thank you.
Prisoner may return to his seat.
So you never even left the trenches?
No, sir.
That's all. Corporal Paris, why didn't you leave the trenches?
Major Vignon was shot, and he fell back on top of me, sir, and knocked me cold.
And were you lying unconscious in the trenches during the entire attack?
Yes, sir.
That's all.
Have you any witnesses to that?
No, sir. I guess everybody was too busy to notice me. And there were so many others lying dead anyway.
But you have no witnesses.
No, sir. I only have a rather large cut on my head, sir.
That could have been self-inflicted later. Thank you. You may stand down.
So something I love about this film is Kirk Douglas's fairly subtle performance, right? Kirk Douglas is known for kind of going over the top himself and being kind of a scenery chewer. But he in that scene you see his restraint, which is very appropriate to the characterization. He's an officer. He has to model professional behavior. But you see his anger building.
He is so furious.
Yeah, and it does. The film reaches a spectacular climax where, not spectacular, but an intense climax where he's able to go what I would call full Kirk, and become a little bit unhinged. But it's very motivated in the context of the film, and it works.
The experience of working with Kubrick on Paths of Glory led to Kirk Douglas hiring him for when the production of Spartacus was in trouble. Kubrick never really considered Spartacus one of his own films, but it clearly set him on his way.
Was it Anthony Mann who started out as the director?
Yeah. Well, our next film is quite a recent one. It's just from about 5-6 years ago, and this movie took me completely by surprise. I have a friend who lives part of the year in Montpelier here, Andrew London, who, thanks to his work over the years in Hollywood, gets to vote on the best foreign language films at the Oscars, which means he watches one movie after the other, and he says, "Movie you gotta see. It's called France, that is Frantz, which is the name of the character who is never seen. But and the movie is directed by the French writer-director Francois Ozon, and very surprisingly, wouldn't you say, for
Yeah, I mean he's made thrillers, musicals. This is a much more kind of straight dramatic piece. Yeah.
And he's made wacky comedies, and his movies often have a gay theme.
And
but this was so moving.
And shot in glorious black and white too, which is so effective.
Yeah. I'll just set the scene for this. This takes place shortly after the war is over. And a woman played by Paula Beer in a small German town is mourning her fiancé who's been killed in the war, but she notices that a mysterious stranger has been leaving flowers on the grave. So anything else you want to say about this clip?
Oh, I mean, other than we're just continuing these films about the cost of war.
Yeah, and you'll see an exchange between this French stranger and the woman's father that tells us a lot about how so many people were psychologically damaged as a result of this war. Let's watch this scene from France.
Kommen Sie rein, bitte. Wie heißen Sie?
Rivoire. Adrien Rivoire.
Sie sind nicht von hier.
Nein,
Woher kommen Sie?
aus Paris.
Franzose.
Ja,
Es tut mir leid, aber ich kann Sie nicht behandeln.
Herr Doktor, ich muss mit Ihnen reden.
Nein. Bitte gehen Sie.
Aber ich bin gar nicht krank. Ich will nur...
Seien Sie still! Jeder Franzose ist für mich der Mörder meines Sohnes. Also verschwinden Sie.
Sie haben recht, Herr Doktor. Ich war auch Soldat. Und ich bin auch ein Mörder.
So we just see Paula Beer at the beginning and end of that clip, but she has gone on to other great roles, including the recent film Miroir Numéro 3, directed by Christian Petzold. Just a luminous, very kind of enigmatic actor.
She's really a great actress.
And I should say, I'll grab the book from you there. So I want to just point out, and this applies to this film, kind of the lens through which we're looking at these films, kind of the criteria we're using to select these films. We're kind of taking our cues from a statement in this book that's by Francois Truffaut, the great French director. So the editor of this book surveyed a whole bunch of filmmakers on what makes a war film effective and to ask them for examples of effective war films. And Truffaut, first of all, he said he was troubled by the notion of effective. He didn't really know what that meant, but he said that a problem with war films is that even the best among them willingly or not glorify war and render it in some way attractive. So he goes on to say, quote, "A film that truly shows war battles almost necessarily exalts war. But the effective war film is often the one in which the action begins after the war, when there is nothing but ruins and desolation everywhere."
Yeah, and that could apply to France and certainly to our next clip, which is very literally about those the devastation. It's called Life and Nothing But. The great French director Bertrand Tavernier and his favorite actor to work with, Philippe Noiret. It takes place in the French countryside, and Noiret is a general who's been in charge of the process of relatives of soldiers coming to claim stuff that has been found on the battlefield. and it speaks directly to what has been left behind. Yeah. So let's watch this clip now.
Ici, ça sera très bien. Ah oui, face au large.
Ça va bien pour vous, non? La sculpture.
L'âge d'or, mon cher ami. L'âge d'or. Jamais vu ça depuis les Grecs, depuis les cathédrales. Même ceux qui ont une main de merde ont de la commande. Vous vous rendez compte? Un monument par village. On fournit pas 35 000 communes par 300 sculpteurs. Tout le monde veut son poilu, sa veuve, sa pyramide, ses marbres. La ronde bosse, le bas-relief, la lettre, alors là, tout ça ronfle comme une usine. Mieux que la Renaissance, mon cher. La résurrection.
Grâce à nos morts.
Grâce à nos morts. Merci à eux.
Madame, je ne peux pas vous laisser passer. Je vous en prie, pardon. Allez-y, mon lieutenant.
Cette personne est avec moi.
Non, madame, mettez-vous ici, s'il vous plaît.
Cette personne est avec moi.
Messieurs, dames, vous ne passez pas.
J'en passe vous prendre ce soir pour le train de 7 heures.
Caporal,
Mon lieutenant,
ramenez ces gens.
à vos ordres, mon lieutenant.
Et moi, qu'est-ce que je fais, moi?
Messieurs, dames.
Monsieur, s'il vous plaît. Monsieur, je vous parle.
Plus tard, madame, vous voyez bien.
Messieurs, dames, ceux qui ont encore leur bagage, vous les groupez avec les autres, s'il vous plaît, merci.
Bon, alors les personnes autorisées, vous pouvez y aller. L'examen se fait là-haut sur la table. Courage.
Pas toutes jeunes, les poules, hein?
So this film, along with another film we're going to talk about in a minute, A Very Long Engagement, so powerfully show not just the psychological, emotional scars of war that the French people experienced particularly, but also the physical scars. This war was mostly fought in France, so they were dealing with that legacy for decades thereafter.
And part of the film is the unexploded mines that are everywhere, and but Noiret just brings such incredible gravity to this role, and
he also has kind of an everyman quality, like Jean Gabin. That's very appealing.
That's true, and there's a bit of romance in the film too, so it's not all gloomy. We just found out this morning, talking about what we were going to do, that this Life and Nothing But was based on a novel, but the novel was an Albanian novel that had to do with the ruins of World War II and the possessions that were going to be repatriated to Italy. So that's key to how creatively people can think about these stories and their application.
All right, what's next on our
Next
list?
on the list is A Very Long Engagement.
Oh, there we go. Yes. So this is such a special film in so many ways. It's Jean-Pierre Jeunet, the writer-director, his and his star Audrey Tautou, they had made Amélie. This is their follow-up, and it's based on a novel that you admire.
Yes, Sébastien Japerceau, which is a pseudonym, but he is known as, or was known as the Graham Greene of France. He's written thrillers and war espionage things, but this again takes place after the war. This woman's fiancé is missing in action. She is completely convinced that he is alive, and she has the tiniest of clues to go on about how to ascertain whether he's alive or dead, which involves going to talk to his veteran friends, and that's what we'll see in this scene. You want to say anything more about that?
No, but that's a good point. It's a post-war film, it's an anti-war film, and it's also kind of a detective story. So it has a lot of really compelling elements.
And a love story again, because she is. Jean-Pierre Jeunet is a very, let's say, he's a whimsical director. Mm-hmm. Sometimes the whimsy is a little too much for some critics. And then you'll see in the scene, his choices of lighting, he cast things in a very, what's in the present is very sepia toned, but in the past, it's the color palette really changes. So let's watch the scene, Audrey Tautou, very long engagement.
En juin 1920, Mathilde a reçu la lettre d'une religieuse. Un homme malade à l'hôpital de Rennes veut la voir. Il aurait rencontré Manek en janvier 17, sur le front de la Somme.
Août 1912. J'étais plutôt bel homme, vous trouvez pas? C'est une de Dion. Avec boîte à prise directe.
Dites-moi ce qui est arrivé à Manek, je vous en prie.
En janvier 17, on m'a désigné pour escorter 5 condamnés à mort sur le front.
Il était parmi eux.
Et je devais les conduire dans une tranchée en première ligne. Les gendarmes nous attendaient avec les prisonniers, à côté d'un petit cimetière en ruine. Qu'est-ce que tu fous avec ces bottes allemandes?
T'attends.
Et t'attends quoi? Si c'est la grâce de Poincaré, tu peux t'asseoir dessus.
Il va la signer. Moi, déjà, normalement, j'aurais pas dû être condamné. Je suis corse, moi. Corse, pas français.
Non, laisse-le. Il déraille un peu, mais ça vaut mieux pour lui.
C'est fini, mon lieutenant?
Celui-là, c'est le froid qui le sauve. En été, la gangrène l'aurait déjà achevé.
Et Manek. Sa blessure, elle le faisait souffrir.
On avait dû lui amputer 2 doigts, mais apparemment il n'avait plus mal. Je devais les conduire dans une tranchée qu'on appelait Bingo Crépuscule.
So just a host of, I mean, Audrey Tautou is so amazing, and you see what's really interesting about her to a degree is that it is a love story, but also she has this she's also kind of in many ways a mother figure to Manek, the young man she's trying to unite with, and you see that really protective maternal quality in her. She has so many different layers to that character, but so many other wonderful performances, including Gaspard Ulliel, who's only about 19 when he makes this film, Thinking about this film now, there's a kind of additional tragic layer, which is Gaspard Ulliel. He passed away in 2022. I believe he was only 37 years old in an accident.
A skiing accident.
Yeah. But wonderful performance by him. He's perfectly cast. And then we have Jodie Foster, who's a great French speaker. She has a great characterization in this film. And then one of the men who's involved with her character, who's known as Bestoche. That actor's name is Jerome Kircher. He's so fantastic in this film. So there's just and then Marion Cotillard is so it's just an embarrassment of riches.
It's an epic. Really, and you see the special effects, the computer generated. What Genet and his collaborators able to do is really spectacular.
Yeah. And unfortunately, he's never kind of been able to equal the brilliance of this and Amélie since. But if that's a career peak, that's a whole lot better than most. So, pretty fantastic.
Well, the last two films we're going to see are both British films, and they both involve real characters, real events. The first one of the two is Regeneration, which was based on a novel by Pat Barker, the great British novelist. And she created some fictional characters, put them in the hospital, the now famous hospital where shell-shocked, of course that's what they called it then, where the soldiers are sent to recover so they can go back on the battlefield. This place is run by a very sympathetic psychologist named Dr. Rivers, played by Jonathan Pryce. What a great performance. And Johnny Lee Miller, as we'll see in this scene, is the lead character, who is fictional, but he interacts with characters who are Siegfried Sassoon, Wilfred Owen, forgetting the name of this hospital, but it's
Craig Lockhart in Scotland.
Yeah, Craig Lockhart is in Scotland. Yeah.
So let's take a look at this clip, which is from early in the film, one of the first sessions between Dr. Rivers and Lieutenant Pryor.
I've been confined to the hospital for 2 weeks.
This is the army, Mr. Pryor. There are rules. Apparently, matron saw you in town. You weren't wearing your hospital armband.
I was looking for a girl, which, as you may or may not know, is not made any easier by walking around with a band on your arm saying I'm a loony.
Yes, well, I'm sure Major Bryce will reconsider his action if you give him good reason.
Aren't you going to ask me if I got one?
One what?
Girl. Woman. Woman.
No, I wasn't.
Well, I did. She's a munitionette. She's very pretty.
Mr. Pryor, would you like to leave it for today?
No.
All right. Let's go back to the time immediately following the April 23rd attack. Have you made any progress beyond that?
No. I don't want to talk about that.
What do you want to talk about?
Something you said's been bothering me. You said officers don't suffer from mutism.
That's right. Officers tend to suffer from stammering. It's the lower ranks who suffer from mutism.
Why?
We don't know. Even the dreams of officers, and believe me, I've studied thousands, tend to be more elaborate than those of the other ranks.
Rather have their dreams than mine.
How do you know? You don't remember yours.
I refuse to believe that General Haig's dreams are more elaborate than those of the lowest ranker. All those noodle-brained dimwits who think they're born to lead as if God gave them a birthright over others.
Well, you certainly conquered your mutism, Mr. Pryor. Interesting, isn't it, that you're one of the very few people here who doesn't stammer?
I think it's even more interesting that you do.
It's at the end of my appointment for today, Mr. Pryor.
Maybe you're the one who's ill.
So the Rivers figure, who again is real, was a real person. This is such a, and the great historical fiction of Pat Barker fleshes out so much about his interesting life. But he was so ahead of his time, right? As you mentioned, we think today about the conditions of the trenches during World War I and how it's just natural that so many people would suffer from mental illness as a result of being confined and being shelled for hours on end and then being thrown into no man's land. But at the time, there was so little compassion and understanding for these soldiers when they came home. So they were stigmatized. They were considered shell-shocked. And you see in the film and in Barker's novels, there's a trilogy of novels, that there was a lack of empathy, a lack of understanding, and in many cases, the soldiers, there was a very prominent argument that these soldiers who were suffering mental illness, that they would have been predisposed to that anyway, even if they hadn't gone to war. So Rivers is someone who steps forward and actually is advancing, pioneering the understanding of what today we would call PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder.
Well, I just finished reading a new book by David Nassau, a great contemporary historian, called The Wounded Generation, coming home after World War II. And that same fallacy was still evident. There was something that predisposed these soldiers to mental illness, and we've got to find out what it is rather than the war itself.
Yeah, and it's just it's a convenient excuse for societies to not take any responsibility for what's done to people in war.
So let's talk about Vera Brittain and the last film we're going to watch.
Yeah, so this is an amazing woman. So this is first a memoir from, I believe it came out in the mid to late 20s, called Testament of Youth. And this an amazing woman from a very privileged family, but she ends up volunteering, serving as a nurse, wanted to go to France and serve close to the battlefield, in part because her brother and her fiance are over there, and she has this shattering experience, and like a lot of people, her views from the beginning of the war to the end of the war are transformed.
The movie starts with this kind of idyllic Merchant in Ivory look at pre-war and right at the beginning of the war and what life was like among the privileged classes. And boy, she had it just shot out from under her.
Yeah, and so wonderful, just phenomenal lead performance by Alicia Vikander, who is just at the center of almost every scene, and just she completely. It's not a domineering performance. It's just she's captivating throughout.
Yeah, and Vera Brittain was just very, very well known in England, and I think Testament of Youth is the first of 3 volumes of memoirs that she wrote, and she lived until in the 70s, I think. Wow. This we're going to see is kind of a climactic scene. We're not giving anything away, but it's at the end of the movie where she winds up going to a meeting.
I would say there are some spoilers here, but it didn't. Rick shared this clip with me before I saw the film, and this was a real. So thank you for introducing it to me, because this was a real revelation for me. There are spoilers in what she says, but I don't think it ruins the movie in any way. And what a scene this is. And get your tissues out, because this scene, I think, on its own is enough to really powerfully move the emotions. Yeah. So this is from near the end of Testament of Youth, which came out around 2014?
I think so,
okay.
Yeah.
Yes, let's take a look.
The German foreign minister dared suggest we are all responsible for the war and should jointly pay the price, to which we say to him, who started it? There's no nothing the Kaiser can do to compensate the men and women of this country, but still the Germans must pay.
The philosophy of an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth is a dangerous one. The whole cycle could be repeated.
We let them walk all over us. Look her in the eye, sir, and tell her to love the Germans.
They killed my eldest son. Then my next one, Harry. You stand here and defend them.
Miss Bruce? Officer. George, please. George Catlin.
The lady has something to say.
Speak up. I was the nurse at the front.
Good on you, miss. Is there anyone else who would like to share anything that you...
No, I haven't finished. For a time, I looked after a hut of German officers.
Not too well, I hope, miss.
As you were speaking, I was remembering one of them. I held his hand as he was dying. He cried out for a woman he loved. He faced the end of his life by asking her forgiveness. I lost a brother in the war. And my fiancé. I can't make sense of it either. Except when I held the hand of that German, it was their hands too that I was holding. Their pain was the same pain. Their blood, the same blood. Our grief is the grief of hundreds and thousands of German women and men. I speak to those of us who were left behind. The mothers, sisters, women. We send our men to war. I fought my father to let my brother go. Because we think it's the right thing. The honorable thing. But all I can do is stand here and ask you, is it? Is that right? Can I find the courage to accept there might be another way? Perhaps their deaths have meaning only if we stand together now and say no. No to killing. No to war. No to the endless cycle of revenge. I say no more of it. No more.
So we can see there this really powerful argument that she's making that a lot of people in particularly England and France were making between the wars, right? That we need to take proactive steps to prevent the next war. And especially after seeing a film like this and A Very Long Engagement and Life and Nothing But, I can better understand the very rational response that many people in Europe had, which was to embrace pacifism in the wake of World War I. Because it was sold as an adventure. You go off, everyone will need to answer the question, what did you do in the war? And the Testament of Youth, there's almost nothing glorious in this film. It's seen through her perspective and the perspective of loss, the worry, and because it's based on a memoir, there's so many nice and it seem true to life scenes where she gets a lot of bad news as she indicates in that speech. But the way those are handled are so delicate and they're not played for the grand effect. And some of those nice details are brought home by the supporting cast here. There's a really big heavy hitters like Dominic West plays her father, Emily Watson, and her mother.
And I'm remembering Miranda Richardson
Right.
as her main tutor at college.
At Oxford, yeah.
Yeah. So, a fantastic film, and it makes me think of, as you were talking, that phrase that, was it Hemingway or Fitzgerald who came up with it, the lost generation.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the Americans who lived through this period and fought in the war, and then wound up in many of the artistically minded people wound up in Paris, meeting like-minded souls from Britain and France. And you think about how this war just decimated the kind of the texture of village life all through England. And Peter Jackson made that terrific movie a few years ago about the archives and the memories of the World War I soldiers. So we've just skimmed the surface of this
we really have.
very, very big topic.
But I think something that really powerfully comes through in all these films is, there's a famous phrase I think is attributed to George Santayana, "Only the dead know the end of war." Well, I think these films actually, in an interesting way, challenge that notion that it's the people left behind are the ones who deal with that ongoing legacy, and they're the ones who are experiencing how in some ways the war doesn't end.
Well, yes, and the same thing, we see it in a movie after World War II, like Best Years of Our Lives, or the movies after the Vietnam War, too. So.
Absolutely. So we hope to come back again soon and have another program on, Rick mentioned the Best Years of Our Lives, on anti-war World War II films, especially those World War II films that focus on the aftermath of war.
Great.
All right. That does it for another edition of Talking About Movies. Thank you, Rick.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you to the people at ORCA.
All right, we'll see you next time.
See you next time.